You know, there's this idea out there, you hear it all the time, that Islam oppresses women. It's a really powerful narrative. But how much of that actually comes from the religion's core texts? Let's dig in and find out. Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? And to get a real answer, we can't just go by what headlines say or what someone's opinion is. We have to go straight to the source.
And that's exactly what we're going to do in this explainer. We're going to tackle some of these common myths head on by looking at the actual evidence from Islam's two primary sources, the Qur'an and the authentic sayings of the Prophet, the Hadith.
All right, so first up, let's start with the big one, maybe the most fundamental question of all. Spiritually, where do women stand in Islam? So you've probably heard the myth that women are somehow spiritually inferior to men. But when you actually open up the Quran, the picture it paints is, well, completely different. And check this out. What's so amazing about this verse is how it's written. It literally lists the Muslim men and Muslim women, the believing men and believing women, one after the other. It goes down the whole list, side by side. It makes it crystal clear that when it comes to spiritual worth and getting rewarded by God, they're on the exact same level. No hierarchy, period. So the principle is really simple. In Islam, you're judged by your piety and your actions, not your gender. I mean, another verse basically says, anyone who does good deeds, man or woman, and is a believer, they'll have a good life. It all boils down to your faith and what you do. Okay, so if there's spiritual equals, what about, the real world? How does that equality play out when it comes to things like education, having a job, or owning your own money? And that brings us to another huge myth. This idea that women are supposed to be confined to the home, totally cut off from learning or having any financial independence. But the source texts, they don't just push back on this, they actually frame these things as fundamental rights for women, not just nice-to-have privileges. I mean, listen to this famous saying from the Prophet Muhammad. It's so direct. Seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. That word every is the key. It's not every Muslim man. It's everybody. It makes learning a religious duty for women just as much as for men. And this wasn't just theory, right? The very first Muslim community was full of incredible female role models. You have Aisha, the Prophet's wife, who was a top-tier scholar. She taught so many people. And then there's his first wife, Khadija. Get this, she was a powerful, successful businesswoman who hired the Prophet before they even got married. She was literally his boss. And this Quranic verse, wow, this was a total game changer for its time. You have to remember, this was an era where women were often treated like property themselves. And here comes this verse, giving them the legal right to inherit property, to own it themselves completely independently. This established financial autonomy for women 1,400 years ago. That's huge. Okay, so we've got spiritual equality and economic rights covered. But what about public life? And what about personal choice? Like, say, who you marry? Yeah, the common myth paints this picture of women being hidden away, forced into marriages. But again, when you actually look at the source texts and the history, you find stories of women being super active in society, and you find this massive emphasis on consent. And some of these stories are just incredible. These are not women who were just sitting at home. You have Nusayba bint Ka'b, a warrior who literally fought to protect the Prophet in the middle of a battle. And then there's Rafida al-Islamiyya, who was basically a pioneer in medicine, running a field hospital on the battlefield, taking care of the wounded soldiers. And on the marriage front, this hadith couldn't be more clear. A woman cannot be married off until her permission is asked for. It's a non-negotiable. Consent is an absolute requirement. So this all leads to a really big, kind of obvious question, right? If all of this is right there in the core texts, why are these myths still so widespread? It's the logical next step, isn't it? After everything we've just seen, you have to wonder, where is the disconnect? Why the confusion? And the answer really comes down to one crucial difference, the difference between religious scripture and cultural practices. Think about it. On one side, you have the foundational, unchanging texts. But on the other side, you have local traditions and social norms that pop up in different places and at different times. A lot of the confusion, a lot of the myths happen when people mix those two up, when a cultural habit gets mistaken for a religious rule. So let's just recap what we found, looking only at the sources. Men and women are spiritual equals. Check. Education is a must for everyone. Check. Women have the right to own property and work. Check. A woman's yes is required for marriage, and women were a huge, active part of early society. All check. And that really leaves us with a final thought, a question that goes way beyond just this one topic. How often do we look at the traditions of a culture and just assume that's what their faith commands? It's a good reminder that if you want the real story, going back to the original source is always the best way to get some clarity.